Chess is a solved battle of perfect information. Every piece is visible. Every move has a consequence that can, in principle, be calculated. Poker is a war of incomplete information. The most important variables are hidden. The best decision can still lose. And what is fascinating, what is genuinely remarkable, is that some of the greatest minds chess has ever produced are choosing to sit at a poker table and discover what they do not yet know. This is not a story about one game replacing another. This is a story about what happens when the sharpest analytical minds on Earth encounter a form of complexity they were never trained for. Stay until the end, because the final idea in this video is the one that will quietly change how you think about both games and about decision-making itself. Let us begin where this story deserves to begin, with respect. Chess is one of the purest intellectual constructs humanity has ever created. It has no randomness, no hidden variables, no luck. What exists on the board is all that exists, and both players see it simultaneously. In this perfectly transparent environment, the better thinker wins. Not sometimes, always, over time, without exception. The complexity of chess is not the complexity of uncertainty. It is the complexity of depth. The number of possible positions in a chess game exceeds the estimated number of atoms in the observable universe. And yet, with enough calculation, every position has a correct answer. It may take a computer hours to find it, and it may take a grandmaster years of training to develop the intuition to approximate it. But it exists. The truth of chess is objective and, in principle, discoverable. This produces something remarkable in the minds of those who pursue chess at the highest level. It produces a relationship with depth that most people never develop. Magnus Carlsen, the highest-rated chess player in recorded history with a peak rating of 2882, has described chess as the pursuit of perfection in an imperfect execution environment. The target is clarity. The game is finding it faster and more accurately than your opponent under the pressure of the clock and the weight of the moment. Pattern recognition in chess is not the ability to remember a book of moves. It is a structural understanding of spatial relationships that develops through thousands of hours of engagement, until the board speaks to you in a language that bypasses analytical steps. Hikaru Nakamura, five-time United States chess champion and widely considered one of the most intuitive players of his generation, has spoken about processing over 100,000 chess games in his development, extracting from them close to 100 strategic rules that operate below the level of conscious thought. That is not knowledge. That is architecture. And this architecture, this disciplined, pattern-saturated, calculation-trained mind, is exactly what walks into a poker room and discovers something it was not expecting. The crossover began organically, the way most genuine curiosities begin. Not as a career decision, but as an exploration. Magnus Carlsen has spoken publicly about his fascination with poker, describing it as a genuinely different kind of intellectual challenge. In April 2022, he competed in the Norwegian Poker Championship, finishing 29th among over 1,000 players in his first major tournament appearance. His performance was striking enough that Daniel Negreanu, one of the most recognized figures in professional poker, dedicated a 14-minute video to analyzing Carlsen's play. When the world chess champion's first serious poker appearance draws that kind of attention from elite professionals in the field, it tells you something about both the quality of mind involved and the genuine interest that exists at the intersection of these two worlds. Hikaru Nakamura played in the 2011 World Series of Poker main event, writing on his personal blog that he had been playing poker, primarily pot limit Omaha and heads-up games, on and off for years. He described the experience of sitting next to poker professionals and navigating a game built on information he could not see with the same analytical intensity he brought to chess. He also produced one of the most revealing comparisons between the two games that any player has made from a position of true depth in both. He said, "In poker, you want to play the weaker guys. In chess, it is the opposite." That sentence alone contains an entire structural analysis of what makes poker different. But perhaps no one has lived this intersection more completely than Jennifer Shahade. A two-time United States women's chess champion and women's grandmaster, Shahade became the Mind Sports ambassador for PokerStars in 2014 and has accumulated over $800,000 in live poker tournament earnings. She has reached final tables at WPT and EPT events, won a major high roller tournament in Prague, and hosts a widely respected poker podcast called The Grid. She wrote a book, Thinking Sideways, that explores directly the overlap between chess, poker, and what she calls better life thinking. When asked what chess gave her for poker, her answer was precise. Chess prepared her to think about good decisions rather than good results, to evaluate process over outcome. That, she said, is both the greatest advantage a chess player brings to poker and the hardest thing for most chess players to actually practice when real money is on the line. Here is where the story shifts from observation to insight, because the question is not simply why chess players are drawn to poker. The question is, what exactly happens when they get there? The structural difference between these two games is one of the most philosophically interesting contrasts in competitive intellectual history. Chess is a game of perfect information. Everything that is true about the current position is visible to both players. There are no hidden pieces. There are no concealed strategies that your opponent cannot, in principle, observe and respond to. The game is entirely transparent. Your advantage comes from processing what is visible more deeply and more accurately than your opponent. Poker is a game of radically incomplete information. The most important information in the game, what your opponent is holding, is invisible to you. And not just invisible in the moment. Invisible in a layered way that requires you to think not about what they have, but about the full range of what they might have, weighted by the probability of each possibility. This is not guessing. This is a fundamentally different type of thinking from anything chess requires. In chess, the question is always, what is the best move? There is an objectively correct answer, even if finding it requires extraordinary depth. In poker, the question is never, what is the best play? The question is always, what is the best decision given what I do not know? And those two questions live in different cognitive universes. They require different skills, they produce different kinds of pressure, and they reward different kinds of intelligence. There is also a psychological layer in poker that chess does not have. Not just in the sense of bluffing, though bluffing is a genuine strategic instrument, but in the deeper sense that your opponent's behavior across time gives you information about how they think, what they fear, what they do when they are strong, and what they do when they are weak. This is not available in chess. In chess, your opponent's psychology might affect their clock management or their emotional state under pressure, but it does not reveal anything about the position. In poker, everything your opponent does is a potential data point in a psychological profile that modifies the probability distribution of their possible hands. This is the hidden complexity that chess masters walk into. And it is the complexity that makes the very best of them genuinely fascinated. And now let us talk about what chess players bring to this environment, because the advantages are real and substantial, and they are also not the advantages that most people think they are. The most obvious advantage is calculation. Chess players at the grandmaster level have developed the ability to think multiple steps ahead, to model the consequences of actions before taking them, to hold multiple simultaneous lines of reasoning and working memory without losing track of any of them. At the poker table, this produces better multi-street thinking. The chess-trained mind is more comfortable building a plan for the entire hand before the flop, rather than making reactive decisions one street at a time. Pattern recognition is the second deep advantage. What Jennifer Shahade identified as the biggest structural crossover between chess and poker is the approach to studying a game. The chess mindset is that you learn from great players, extract principles, and build a framework that operates faster than conscious reasoning. This is exactly what elite poker study produces. The best poker players do not calculate pot odds on every hand. They have built pattern libraries so deep that the correct range of actions in most situations presents itself without requiring explicit reasoning. Chess players understand this process intimately. Discipline is the third advantage. The chess player who reaches the grandmaster level has spent years making decisions in high-stakes competitive environments where a single moment of inattention can destroy the product of hours of preparation. They understand that emotional control is not a bonus skill. It is a prerequisite for performance. This translates directly to the mental game demands of high-pressure poker. And strategic thinking at the macro level, the ability to manage long-term position and short-term tactics simultaneously, is a skill that chess builds in a way that few other pursuits can match. But here is where the story becomes genuinely interesting. And this is where most chess players encounter the edge of what their training prepared them for. Variance. This single concept is the wall that most analytically trained minds hit when they first engage seriously with poker. And it is not because they do not understand variance intellectually. Variance is a statistical concept, and analytical minds have no difficulty with statistics. The problem is emotional. The problem is experiential. In chess, if you make the best decisions consistently, you win. The causal chain from good process to good outcome is reliable enough that performance and results are strongly correlated over a meaningful sample of games. Losing a few games when you outplayed your opponent is unusual. It happens from time to time due to blunders under time pressure or unusual circumstances, but it is not a structural feature of the game. In poker, making the best decisions consistently does not guarantee winning. You can play perfectly and lose for sessions, for weeks, for months. The variance is enormous. A player who has a genuine edge of a few percentage points over the field may still experience dramatic losing stretches that, from the inside, feel indistinguishable from playing badly. The result does not reliably tell you whether the process was correct. This is a fundamentally different relationship between effort and outcome than anything chess prepares you for. What Jennifer Shahade identified as the key insight she took from chess into poker, that you must evaluate your decisions rather than your results, is precisely the insight that most chess players struggle to practice when the losing stretch goes on for 4 weeks and the bankroll has dropped by 30%. Knowing the principle and living it under the actual pressure of variance are separated by a gap that analytical training alone cannot bridge. Nakamura captured this tension precisely in one of his reflections on the game. He noted that in chess, there is almost always a narrow path to salvaging a worse position. Even when you play badly, the game does not punish you immediately and irrevocably. In poker, a bad decision can be immediately and permanently expensive in a way that chess never is. The tempo of consequence in poker is faster and more visceral, and the emotional regulation required to absorb that tempo without letting it distort your next decision is a skill that must be developed specifically through poker experience. It does not transfer automatically from chess. This is where the most analytically brilliant chess-to-poker crossover players get humbled, not by their inability to calculate, but by their inability to remain emotionally neutral when correct decisions produce wrong outcomes. The game is testing something that chess never tested. Let us now go deep into the poker concepts that matter most in this context, because understanding them is what transforms the analytical foundation that chess provides into actual poker competence. The most important concept for a chess player entering poker to understand is range thinking. In chess, you think about the position. In early poker thinking, players think about their hand. What do I have? Is it strong? Should I bet? This is hand thinking, and it is the most expensive mistake a player can make. Range thinking asks a different question. Not what do I have, but what does my opponent think I might have? And what range of hands might they have, given everything they have done in this hand and in previous hands? Your decision is not a response to your cards. Your decision is an action taken by your entire range of possible hands in this situation, and it must be calibrated to be optimal across that entire range. Here's a simple example. You raise pre-flop from middle position. The flop comes ace-9-2. Your opponent checks to you. A hand-thinking player asks, do I have a piece of this flop? A range-thinking player asks, what does my range of hands look like on this flop, and what does my opponent's range look like? If I raised from middle position, my range contains a lot of strong aces and big pairs. This flop favors my range heavily. I can bet frequently here not because of what I specifically have, but because my range as a whole is strong on this board texture. That is range thinking. It is a genuinely different cognitive framework, and it is the framework that separates consistent winners from players who have all the other skills but produce inconsistent results. Expected value, or EV, is the second concept that chess players adapt to quickly once they understand it correctly. EV means this: if I made this exact decision in this exact situation 1,000 times, what would be the average outcome? A decision that wins money on average is positive EV. A decision that loses money on average is negative EV. The result of any individual instance of that decision is irrelevant to its EV. This is the framework that allows a player to make a mathematically correct call, lose the hand, and feel no regret. Because the decision was right even though the outcome was wrong. Chess players conceptually understand this immediately. The challenge, as we discussed, is living it when the outcomes are consistently painful. The GTO versus exploitative balance is the third concept, and it is where chess-level strategic thinking finds its most natural poker application. GTO, or Game Theory Optimal Play, means making decisions that are mathematically unexploitable. No matter what your opponent does, your GTO strategy performs optimally. Exploitative play means deviating from perfect balance to take advantage of specific weaknesses you have identified in a specific opponent. The tension between these two approaches, knowing when to follow the mathematical baseline and when to deviate based on observation of a particular player's tendencies, is one of the deepest strategic questions in poker. And it is exactly the kind of question that a mind trained in chess, which requires constant calibration between opening theory and creative novelties, is naturally equipped to navigate. Chess asks, what is the best move? Poker asks, what is the best decision given what I do not know? I want you to sit with that distinction for a moment, because it is not subtle, it is fundamental. It describes two completely different relationships with knowledge and uncertainty. Chess is a game about finding truth in a fully visible environment. Poker is a game about making the best possible decision in an environment where the most critical truths are permanently hidden. This is why some of the greatest chess minds find poker compelling in a way that goes beyond curiosity or entertainment. It is because poker offers a challenge that their training made them qualified to face but did not make them equipped to solve. It requires the same disciplines, the calculation, the pattern recognition, the long-term thinking, the emotional control, but it deploys them in a fundamentally different context. A context where the answer is never fully knowable and the quality of your process is only confirmable in aggregate, over large samples, over time. In a deep sense, poker is a more accurate simulation of the decisions that matter in real life than chess is. Real life does not give you perfect information. Real decisions, about careers, about relationships, about risks, are made in environments where the most important variables are hidden, where correct process does not guarantee good outcomes, where variance is constant and emotional regulation is the difference between coherent long-term thinking and reactive short-term catastrophe. This is why the chess masters who have explored poker seriously, Carlsen, Nakamura, Shahade, find themselves describing it not as a different game, but as a different kind of thinking, a different relationship with uncertainty, a different test of the same fundamental quality they have been developing since they first learned to see the board. If you are watching this video as someone who comes from a chess background, or from any analytical discipline that has trained you to seek correct answers in visible environments, there is a structured path into the kind of thinking that poker rewards. It is not the path of trying to find the optimal answer in each hand. It is the path of building a framework for making good decisions under conditions of permanent, incomplete information. That framework is what the Mind of a Grinder Complete system was built to provide. 10 ebooks that move through the layers of poker thinking systematically: range construction, expected value, emotional regulation under variance, positional dynamics, psychological awareness, decision structure. Not tips, not shortcuts. A complete architecture of how a serious mind approaches this specific kind of problem. The link is in the pinned comment. If this video gave you something real to think about, the system gives you the path forward. $29.90. The launch price, and it will not remain at this level. Look for it in the pinned comment before the week ends. Chess masters calculate what is. Poker players decide what could be. That final distinction is not just a poetic line. It describes a genuine difference in the cognitive posture required by each game. The chess master faces a board where truth is visible, and the challenge is depth. The poker player faces a game where truth is hidden, and the challenge is probability, inference, psychology, and the emotional discipline to act correctly on incomplete information without being paralyzed by the uncertainty. Both postures are forms of intelligence. Both require extraordinary training to reach, but they are different. And what is remarkable, what is genuinely moving about the stories of Carlsen sitting down at a poker table for the first time, of Nakamura navigating a World Series main event, with the same focused intensity he brings to a chess tournament, of Shahade building an $800,000 tournament career while writing books that connect these two worlds at the level of principle, is that these minds are not finding poker easy. They are finding it challenging in a way that their chess preparation did not predict. And they are leaning into that challenge because the challenge itself is the reward. Great minds do not stay where they are comfortable. They move toward complexity that reveals their edges. Poker, for the chess master, is exactly that complexity. It tests not just what they can calculate, but what they can endure without calculating. It tests not just their depth, but their equanimity. It tests not just their strategy, but their humanity. And that test, that specific, irreplaceable test, is why this game has drawn some of the finest analytical minds in the world to sit across a green felt table and ask the question that chess never asks. Not, what is the best move? But, given everything I cannot see, what is the wisest thing I can do right now? That question, answered correctly, over and over, under pressure, across thousands of decisions, in the presence of variance that constantly distorts the feedback and tempts you toward shortcuts your training cannot justify, is what poker is. And it is, in a very real sense, what life is. This is not just a game. This is a higher level of thinking. Leave a comment. If you come from a chess background or any analytical discipline, what is the hardest thing about poker thinking for you? And if you play poker, what has it taught you about making decisions that chess or any other structured game never could? I read every comment. This channel grows when the conversation is real. Like this video, subscribe to Mind of a Grinder, and go play your next session with this question alive in your mind. Not what do I have, but what is the wisest decision I can make given what I cannot see? Chess masters calculate what is. Poker players decide what could be. Now go decide.